Hello there, Sir from 17 once again. This is my Uncharted 4 Crushing Difficulty video walkthrough. This is Chapter 8, it is the grave of Henry Avery. This is a pretty long level, and I didn't realise just how long it was until I was editing this video together. And it has a lot of everything in it. It has some new features, it has some old features, it has a celebration of what makes Uncharted Uncharted, and it has, you know, a couple of decent firefights, a couple of awkward firefights, and a couple of moments where you can actually stealth, but I'm not going to, because me and the stealth in Uncharted 4, we don't get on all that well. And I want to shout out two people who have educated me in some ways of the stealth being maybe worth something, when I've openly stated and still personally think that it's not. And the first is Jammer, who showed me that you can do the marooned level of this game on Crushing without being spotted and get out of that area. And the second guy is a dude by the name of Renegade Operative, who I've not seen on the Sons of Kojima podcast in a long time, but I know he's generally affiliated with that side of YouTube with those cool people, and he's got his own thing going. But he has done the Scotland graveyard that you're going to watch in this video, and he got through that on Crushing without being spotted, and I personally didn't think you could do that either, because I got all the way to the final balcony area and I kept getting spotted, but he has a really good path to get through that area, which I commend him for finding that, because I tried for about 20 minutes, and then in the end I just decided to shoot everybody, which is what you're going to see in this. So a shout out to those two people, using the stealth as intended, and just know, folks, that for the most, I'm not going to be using stealth too much in this game, because I don't get on with it. It's one of those things where I don't think it's good enough, and I don't enjoy it at all. And I've noticed something that happens in almost all the stealth encounters so far. Like, when I've watched people do it, they do the exact same path that I did, and then at the end, they'll have some deviation that makes it successful, whereas mine was a deviation that made it fail. And to me, stealth should be the culmination of understanding mechanics and learning patterns and being able to do it in a multitude of ways. And that probably applies here once you figure them out, but it just seems really rigid, like there's one set path that they intended you to take, and everything else is close to impossible to mix it up with. And to me, that's just not good stealth. And I have a lot of difficulties enjoying a stealth mechanic when it is so rigid or so seemingly bullshit. And there's so many encounters that I tried to stealth for the purpose of this walkthrough to maybe make it easier for you. And I wasn't having any fun, and I couldn't get them to work as I wanted them to. And in the end, when I started shooting, it was so much simpler. And to me, stealth should be always the simpler option. That's the point of it. And in this game, it seems to be a lot more effort than it's worth in a lot of ways. But that doesn't mean, just because I'm not a fan of it, that you can't be 100% viable with it. And I would recommend that you try, because it is fun at first, and there is success to be had. And this is another interesting sequence too. This was the first firefight that pretty much reinforced in my mind that I wasn't going to enjoy the combat in this game as much as I would have hoped. And it's just because there's so many enemies. Like, it's one of the first firefights in the game, and there's about 15 dudes that they throw at us here. And at first I thought, maybe I can stealth it, maybe I can use this crate and get my stealth on. So I tried to push the crate and get all sneaky and get up that way, and I got spotted and it kicked off. And then I tried choking everybody and see if that was a decent strategy, and it was, but it takes a long time to do that. And then in the end I'm like, fuck it, I'm going to shoot people, because this is taking too long. And it's the sentiment of a lot of the firefights on Crushing. It's just like, what's the fucking point in finesse here when I can just shoot everybody and I'm done with it? So you'll see a crossfade just there, because of course checkpoints never link up as intended. And then I'm going to use my Pyro 45 and I'm going to start causing some chaos. So the dynamite works the exact same as the grenades, and if you work this right, you can get a bunch of multi-kills, which is going to thin out the herd, but be aware there's multiple spawns in this sequence, so more guys are going to come. The only threat from where I am is I get another unwanted fucking trophy. Where were all these trophies when I was first playing? Is this, getting flanked from that left-hand side. This puts you into a spot of bother, because if there's anybody to your right, they might kill you. I'm going to try and grab this guy off the balcony. This can be kind of awkward when he doesn't do the fast one, and you stood there taking bullets. And all I'm going to do is use these two pieces of cover in conjunction with one another to thin out the guys that are flanking. Sam's going to do his thing of whatever the hell Sam does in these fights. and we're going to try our best not to get shot by people from behind. And there's always a palpable feeling of chaos, which I think is one of the strengths of the game, actually. It's one of the things I've come to enjoy in the combat, even though, as I've mentioned, and I'm going to keep mentioning, I just don't find the combat very fun in this game. But the chaos is definitely something different for me, because I'm not used to coming to a walkthrough such as this and not having a goal, not having a path on where to go. And in certain firefights, I can control the engagement really well, and I can show you some pretty safe spots, but in a fight such as this, no one's going to have the same fight here, unless you do something incredibly specific, because the enemies all go in different places, and it makes it very dynamic, and it's actually a really cool thing. And it's one of those things that gaming is moving towards, this truly random variables in gameplay, and I think in certain areas it can be really wanted and really enjoyable. I'm just going to be scouting around picking up ammunition. The one thing I will recommend to anybody playing this game, if you've just come to this video for a little guidance, make sure you always have paramount gear of whatever's available to you. Pick up the guns you enjoy, the guns you trust, and try and get as much ammunition in them as you can. Doesn't matter if it takes you 10 minutes of scouring around looking for those glowing symbols like it's treasure in Resident Evil 4, just make sure that you've always got what you need. It'll come in handy so well, and if there's a couple of fights that you're looking to, that you're not that confident in being able to do, keep a couple grenades for them. You know, try and get the best possible gear you can get. I noticed, as I do a jump here and I don't grab anything, which is always disheartening, even though it's the same kind of distance and he grabs it fine that time. But I noticed that I would get into situations where I often had 2 power weapons, and I don't know if they're called power weapons in this game. I'm talking about the weapons that are designated with gold pictures. They seem to be somehow rarer or better than the others in some way, but you really wouldn't notice, because even in the toughest sequences in Uncharted 4, I don't think having specific weapons ever truly helped me, because I can't do any kind of crazy spawn kills or any exploitative kind of technique. That was wonderful. Love it. If you're wondering here, guys, you've got to wait for Sam to do his bullshit so that he'll catch our arm. And there's a couple instances in the platforming where you get ahead of the scripting a little bit. Oh, maybe this is not the moment. My bad. I just missed the jump, apparently. Which can happen too. It's quite dynamic. I do love the swinging, though. The swinging is amazing. I wish you could use it more in combat. And I know that there are areas where you definitely can. But for every time you get what you want on a rope, there are several times where you get what you don't want, where Nathan kind of doesn't get enough inertia and you end up swinging there like a lone testicle waiting to be kicked, which can be a real bad situation to be in. And it happens a lot, but it's still fun to do. It's not quite as powerful as, for instance, the sky rails were in Bioshock Infinite, but it would be nice if you could somehow get a measure of invincibility while swinging, or maybe some kind... Can you imagine if this game had a perk system of some sorts? I would definitely spec towards swinging, just to give your character an advantage, like maybe double damage while swinging, or, you know, half the damage taken, some kind of increased defense, interesting stuff like that. I would probably spec towards all of that kind of stuff, because I want to try and make the fights exciting, and because the game treats cover in such a xenophobic way, you know, you don't spend much of this game in cover outside of very specific moments, and the cover that you'll be taking is usually hanging off of ledges rather than sitting behind some kind of conveniently placed chest-high object. So there's a lot of interesting takes on this genre in this game, and in a lot of ways I think they've done a fantastic job of taking expectations and altering them. But we're coming up to the first real big firefight of this level, and it's going to start once we drop down on top of this dude by pressing circle, which is going to do a stealth kill, believe it or not. You can do flying stealth kills in this game, which is another one of those things where it's like, how can it have all these great tools and yet the stealth still feels like shit? I don't get it. Like, this game has so many fast options to deal with people when you get the jump on them, literally, that it should be amazing, and it just never is. So, in a previous video I mentioned that the grenade icon, when you throw grenades, is a little bit confusing when you can't see it. And I'm going to be using grenades here to cause some terror, as I get a nice double kill there. This is a massive encounter, and I've tried to do several approaches for stealth to get up onto that balcony to get behind those people, and there will be a way, because I'm noticing that there is ways to do stealth. I'm just not the guy to find them. And I also managed to stumble on a couple of weapon caches that get you a rifle, and I've managed to sneak around this area choking people out and everything. But once again, I had a video of me clearing this area, taking out everybody silently with strangulation techniques. It took 40 minutes to do it, and I refuse to put a 40-minute sequence in a game when I can do it quicker by shooting people. And admittedly, I could have done it faster. You know, I was taking my time, I was being methodical, I was watching and everything, but this is a 40-minute level, and that's when this sequence is condensed down to like 5 minutes of fighting, which you're about to watch now. As that guy saw me then, and I'm not entirely too sure why. I was in the grass, you know, he shouldn't have spotted me, but he did, and, you know, we're going to get on with it, we're going to kill people. We're going to do the Uncharted thing. And somebody mentioned on that first video when I was talking about how they've changed the engine for cover and shooting in cover. This is lucky. Whew, hold that breath. You notice how when you need to kill somebody, you never get the kill shot. You always get this bullshit up and down fucking jack-in-a-box nonsense. So frustrating. Someone is behind me though somewhere, and I think Sam probably dealt with them, which is awesome. But as I was saying, sorry, in the first video, somebody mentioned that The Last of Us also has this engine for shooting, so that the third-person cover technique just isn't effective in that game either. And honestly, never noticed. Last of Us to me is so far removed from a third-person shooter that I wouldn't even categorize it as one, even though it is one. And you might wonder, well, what do you mean by that? When I first played that game, I played it like a shooter. And I had success because they've programmed it so that you can have success that way. But to play that game as just a straight shooter is to take away from so many aspects of what makes that game really great. There is a very visceral, intense, stealth/melee system in that game, which is fantastic. And I went back on Grounded with the intention of not shooting as much, and I managed to have such a better experience, because I feel that that game is better when it's played like that, when it's played as, you know, as if bullets are rare, like what it's meant to be, and they are rare in that game. This game isn't like that. You know, Uncharted is a third-person shooter to the wall. You are forced into so many gunfights in this game that there's no choice. So the systems have to be there to back up the want for the need for what the player has to do. And in The Last of Us, it always feels like there's another way, which is one of the things I truly appreciate about that game, and it's why it's my favourite Naughty Dog game, by a large margin. But Uncharted is a third-person shooter with its balls out. You know, it's got all these other great elements that add to it, but when you get right down to it, you're going to be shooting. And we're going to be introduced now to how the cover trick doesn't work in this game. So do you notice that this guy's on a turret? And I am perfectly in cover. Yeah, when I get visible of him, he can hit me, even though he can't hit me. And that's the most powerful addition on the battlefield now, and that's how the game has changed. And you can still do it occasionally like that. For whatever reason, he couldn't see me then, and I was able to get a nice quick headshot and put him down. And then that fight was, what, 5 minutes long rather than 35 minutes long. But I would say that this is most definitely a third-person shooter in almost every way, because there are certain parts of it that you just cannot mitigate in any other way. It's designed around it. Last of Us, let's think if there's any areas of Last of Us where you have to shoot, or if you have to fight. So, when you get to Pittsburgh and you do the big fight against the dudes, when you're trying to stick your head on the glass in that shop, that is a mandatory fight, because I've stealthed all the way to the gate, and Joel will not open it for some reason. It's just, you have to kill those people. I was always disappointed with that, because I felt it could have been so much better if they'd have allowed us to just leave. And that's a really tough fight as well when you're playing on the harder difficulties. But that is one where you have to fight. You don't have to shoot, but you have to fight. I'm sure there's probably a few other places in that game where you have to fight. But for the most, there's so many of them that... Another one where I think you have to fight is the one where the demo was released, and there's that clicker, and there's those normal dudes walking around, and you have to pull that super loud rusted like draw thing out from front of the door. That was designed in such a douchey way that you could stealth all the way up to that machine, and pulling it would alert everybody. so it didn't matter if you'd done all the hard work to get there. That was another one of those kicking the balls moments, and maybe it's just the way that they like to make games, Naughty Dog, because if you think about it, this game has a ton of kicking the ball moments too, where it looks like you can stealth past everybody, and then they're like, oh, we can't do that. And you're like, oh, shit, I'll do something else then. And so did Last of Us in a few areas, so maybe it's just the way that they like to make games. Oh, another thing I love about this game, the South African accents. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's because I'm a big, is it Neil Blomkamp fan? Or just Lethal Weapon 2 from being too young. But there is nothing better than having, like, a paramilitary that is from that's South African or has some kind of South African dialect. Because I just think it's perfect. Even when I'm getting pissed off at the game and I can't do something, just listening to them talk makes me smile. And I think that that is a fantastic touch for anybody who, like me, really likes that accent. Because it's just fun, dude. It really is. If you're not quoting Lethal Weapon 2 and the Krugerrants and all that shit when you play this, you're missing out on an opportunity for some extra fun. And this is a game that doesn't really have that many missed opportunities. I feel like they went full hog and did everything they want. Watch this for a save. Oh yeah. Completely unintentional. Why didn't he grab that? Not enough inertia? Very strange. This Scotland area is interesting though. It reminds me a lot of Winter from Last of Us. I know I'm sounding like a broken record with the Last of Us stuff. I might as well just marry it. But did anybody else get the feeling, and not just because of the snow, just the feeling of the grass withered and maybe the stark lighting. It's very mute and there's a bitterness to it. It pretty much symbolises Scotland very well. It's a wasteland where people used to fight with swords, and now they choose fish and chips and kebabs over such rudimentary weaponry, but it's still pretty much a wasteland. That's why we built a giant wall to keep them in. Oh my goodness. It must be interesting. Like, I don't know if the rest of the world learns a lot about, you know, UK/British history when it comes to the relations between places like Scotland, England, and, you know, the Anglo-Saxons and the Vikings and everything. Because we learnt about it when we were really young. So to us, it was all romanticised of, oh my goodness, we've sailed around the world and shook everyone's hands and said, welcome to the Empire. When really it was, we raped and pillaged around the world and chopped off people's hands and we all said, join the Empire and bow to our faith or we're going to fucking massacre you in this giant pool of death. So it's such a very different way of showing the same piece of history. But I always wonder what people think it's like, because people for some reason think I sound Scottish, which, if you don't know accents and dialects, and it can be difficult because there's hundreds of them, I suppose maybe there's a part of my aspect that does sound slightly different. You know, I get called Australian, I get called Scottish, I've been called Welsh, and the one thing that we have in common when people ask me that is if anybody is from the place that people say I sound like, they will be the first to say, you do not know what people from X place sound like, because one of the things you can pick up, very similar way to as the human eye can pick up something that's not human when it's trying to be human, a la CGI, it's so immediately apparent when somebody doesn't have the right accent for a place, or where they have a certain accent and it's like, oh wow, that's this. And they can be very close. Like, I get the West Country and I get the Welsh accents mixed together because, of course, it's a very similar part of the world, and they're all they've got a very special way of talking, like every, you know, accent and what have you has. But one thing you will never find is you will never see people from an area confusing accents in such a strong way as people who've never been there. And I'll always remember what somebody said to me, because it was on about, I think, The Great Escape. There's a moment in The Great Escape where they speak German, and German is one of those languages, apparently, this is just what a German person told me, that because accents are so jarring that you would not have somebody who is not native German speaking German without noticing, apparently. And this could be all bullshit, I don't know, I'm no language specialist by any means. But apparently it just wouldn't work because, unfortunately, it's impossible to have a flawless accent in a lot of languages unless you've learnt it for a long time and maybe lived there, or maybe some of the techniques that some of those really good linguists use. I'm not too sure. But apparently that was a big hole in that film that this German person thought was funny because it's easy to spot. Yeah, isn't it funny how you think you know an accent and then when you come to asking where it is, you're wrong? Happens to the best of us. But this is Uncharted. Accent talk is over. Once you come up to this little grave, they're going to turn it sideways. It's going to open up a crypt and we're going to do some puzzle solving. There's also a puzzle coming up now which is not that difficult. I'm just going to show you perhaps the hardest way to do it, which is not my intention, guys. I actually got kind of screwed. I was recording this without volume. And when you do the puzzle, Nathan says, that has to be it, right? Or something like that. And I couldn't hear if he'd fucking said it. So I got what I was certain was the right answer. Then I went to the door, and I was trying to put my arm in it, and he wouldn't put his arm in. He kept putting it, and the spikes kept coming out ever so slightly. And it was saying it was wrong. But when you look at it, it was right. It was the right cross on the left, the right cross on the right, and the right central one, and then there was the bucket full of water at the top. It was the answer. And it didn't work for some reason. I must have done something wrong and not heard it. But I had to restart the chapter because it just wouldn't work. And I know it was right because I remembered the order. But this is the first part of the puzzle anyhow. This is going to be opening up this big fancy mechanism. And you have to go around the back once you've examined these, and then you have to use Sam's lighter to turn on the flame. And can you remember in the early video where I mentioned that the frustrating part of this game, for me in a lot of ways, is not understanding the scripting. It has a very strange priority of certain features. Like, for instance, I don't know if we could have gone directly to the back of this and lit it. We might have been able to do that, but for every moment where you can do stuff like that, you have to have done several arbitrary steps to get there. And there's a lot of places in this game where that's a pain for somebody like me who's trying to show you the quickest way through it to have the least resistance. It can be tough to do. There's so many encounters where you can get checkpoints, but they're not immediately obvious how you got those checkpoints and how to reenact it. Like, I saw Darkside Phil get a checkpoint in Marooned, and I saw him previously not get one. And it made me think, even though I've already recorded that sequence, like, is there a way to get a checkpoint and I just didn't script it right? And I always think back to Call of Duty 4, because in Call of Duty 4, No Fighting in the War Room was a level where there was about several potential checkpoints you could get, but depending on the timer and depending on when you tripped the certain areas would depend on which ones you got. And if you were really unlucky, you didn't get any. And it made that sequence historically insane. Like, that is one of the toughest areas of any Call of Duty ever conceived. And the best thing about them remastering it is it's getting released again. And the campaign, hopefully, is going to be amazing and all, prettified and what have you. And I get to make a guide for Call of Duty 4, which I didn't even have YouTube back then, That was one of the first games that I'd tried to beat on the hardest difficulty. And it was very, very difficult. But that is a game where if you script it wrong, you can fuck yourself and you just don't know what to do, and it's really tricky. And there's instances in this game where I'm wondering, maybe I could have done something different to make my life easier, or maybe crushing just removes all those checkpoints, and it was just a checkpoint that's exclusive to those early levels. But here is the sequence where you can stealth to the door out of the cemetery, and there's a trophy for doing it. As I mentioned earlier, I'm not going to be doing it, guys, because I couldn't figure out the final part of it. I kept getting spotted. I got frustrated, and then I decided to shoot people. And I'm not going to show you the best way to shoot people either, in my defense. I'm going to go back into that crypt, assuming that the enemies are going to rush you, but the one thing that you'll notice on Uncharted 4 is that they seem to take pride in this idea of dynamic awareness on the enemies. So the enemies can now lose you, which is just an easy way of saying, instead of having everybody bum rush you and try and kill you like they normally would in these games, a few of them will do that, and the rest of them will just walk around like idiots waiting for you to kill them. So it's kind of weird. But I'm going to take out these first few guys, and then I'm going to go and kill a shotgunner. And then I'm going to shoot a dude in the face, and it's going to kick off. And the mistake I'm going to make is I should have gone into cover behind the grave, and then just dealt with everybody from there. Instead, I go into the grave, assuming I can get people to come to me, and I just become a fish in a barrel of grenades. So really, really bad choice on mine, but you are literally watching a strategy evolve after trying to stealth this and having no success. Am I going to get that guy over there? I think I am. Maybe? Yeah. So the first path that I tried to stealth went this way. If you go all the way to the right here, there's a guy patrolling with a shotgun. You can go past him, you can go into some deep grass, and you're in the building that you need to be a floor and a bit up to get to the door. I managed to get to the floor above, and then I got spotted. And that happened about 4 times. The second path I tried was climbing on the building, and then jumping across from that bit. But once again, I ended up getting spotted, so I just called it off as a bad idea. Like, it seems like you would think there would be a path up the mountain to the right that would enable us just to climb directly up and circumvent all of it. But apparently that's too easy. They want you to do something different. I do like the colour of that brush. It looks really nice. Is it lavender or something? I'm not too sure exactly what that bud is, but it's a nice contrast of colour in an otherwise rather bleary landscape. Am I going to go and grab him too? Strange too, the enemies can spot bodies, but you can't move bodies. It seems like such a strange thing to have a stealth feature and then not have a feature to prolong stealth. Because the enemies have really good vision too. They will spot bodies that you do not think they should be able to spot. I saw a dude spot a body that was buried in the tall grass. Like, I couldn't fucking see it. And I was next to it. Yet he saw it and started pointing and everybody got pissed off. Happens a lot in this game. That noise there is a signification that somebody spotted you, but they don't know it's you. If it happens again, then they know it's you and everything kicks off. But this is where I thought I'd be able to do some cheeky shooting from. I was very wrong, so do not do what I'm doing now. Do what I do after this. So I shoot him with a nice quick shot. Everyone hears it. Everybody now knows where we are because they're symbiotically linked, and then the bullets start flying. So I'm like, okay, we'll do some counter shooting. Let's see how this works. Sam's having a good time. I can't see a fucking thing. I've not really thought this through. And there it is. As soon as you hear it, it's going to land next to you because the grenades are that good. And there's the second one. And this is when it just fucking becomes World at War. So, like, look at this. This was such a bad idea. Fun though, I'm glad I got to show this because there's probably people wondering, well, what's so bad about the grenades in this one? It's just their ability to find you. They're like the worms from that classic strategy game. They chuck the grenades into the air and they land bang next to you every single time. They never have a bad throw. They never accidentally hit a wall. I nearly killed myself then. Look at that. It's very lenient though, this game, when it comes to damage off grenades. Incredibly lenient. But look at it. Everybody's got infinite and everybody can just keep tossing them. The only good thing about it is you can shoot people and they'll drop them and they might help. But for everything else, it's just a nightmare. So yeah, moral of the story, don't do what I'm doing here, or you'll be in trouble. I am going to get out though, guys, and I'm going to get into a better position and start killing fools. It's just, look at this, like, what the fuck is going on? And they're not going to push. They never push. They just keep chucking grenades. Like, why would you push when you've got this infinite ammo grenade bullshit? And somebody's behind me here. Oh no, not back down there, Chris. You don't want to be there. Anywhere but here. Here it comes. More grenades. You see what I mean though? In any other game, they would have rushed me. Even in the older Uncharted, they would have rushed me here, and this would have been a really good, powerful position. But in this game, it just didn't. Because everybody sits back chucking nades instead, because it's such a better strat. And then I come down here, which is where you should have come to begin with for a better position. And then we can shoot a couple of guys to a side, and get behind some statues and shit. The tall grass is actually a hindrance as well. I find it really frustrating that the enemies can all see perfectly through tall grass, and you can't see a fucking thing, so you're getting shot by dudes buried in grass. But right here is about as good as the spot gets, because Sam's doing a great job of distracting people. We're going to shoot them while they're fighting, and if anybody flanks, we've got a really nice, clean shot on them. And if there's any more grenades, we can just move forward. But like stuff like those moments, how are you meant to shoot somebody when you can't see them? Like, him then. Guy can see me fucking perfectly, just murders me through a bush. I couldn't see toss. Always an interesting conceit, isn't it? And I wonder if in the future we'll get to the point where enemies won't be able to see you perfectly through the fucking grass all the time. They won't have this conscious, you know, omniscient bullshit happening all the time. Because those moments where the computer is fallible are beautiful. And games have done it, man. Games have had enemies fall over and slip and stuff and panic and all kinds of strange little addendums to behaviour. Blind fire in this game is really good too. I didn't give it the credit it deserves. I love the Magnum as well, the good old Bartok. It only gets, I think it's 6 bullets per time you find it. But every one of those shots is an instant kill, even if that reticle is a bizarre upside down triangle thing. That it's a gun that works, and I always look at it like this. You can have a gun with 20 bullets in, where it might take 5 bullets to get a kill if you're lucky. Or you can get one that is a guaranteed one shot and you don't have to worry. So you've definitely got 6 deaths to dish out. So I'm pretty comfortable with keeping the Magnum and then having something like the AK on backup. Because the AK is fucking worthless. It's just a scatter shot. It's like throwing Skittles at people. You play Taste the Rainbow on their face and they still come back for more. It's very strange. But if you climb that central building, that's the building where you can jump across to get to the door. That was one of the strategies that I was trying for a while, but I couldn't do the end of it. I think there's one dude left now, just being kind of awkward. And it is interesting. I mentioned how I think that there's a lot of chaos in this game. And it stems from the way that they've tweaked the AI to lose you, effectively. Which is funny because they haven't tweaked everybody spotting you at the same time. Yet they've... Oh, maybe there isn't anybody left. Why is the music still playing? Oh, there you go. That guy. Music cues, one of the most powerful in gaming. If you can understand what all the sounds mean, you will know what is happening without having to see it. And it's almost universal at this point, what certain music cues mean. Everybody uses slightly different music, but for the most, there is a danger cue, there is a safety cue, there is all kinds of ways of telling. And Uncharted is no different in this. It's got dialogue cues to tell you that everybody's dead. You know, generally the character that you're with will go from a position of being crouched and ready for battle to standing up and relaxing, putting their gun away. All kinds of great different cues to inform the player that you're done. But that was the long way, the long and the hard way of doing that sequence. And now we can get back to doing the platforming, skating on the shale or wherever the hell this stuff is, which is a very weird mechanic. A slippy area to skate on and do random slidiness. It's something that they almost forget as well. There's a couple of moments later on where you use it. There's a couple that include mud, which are cool, but for the most, it's not relied on as much as I thought they were going to do. There's one really good one, which you do with Elena, where a building's breaking up and it looks so beautiful. Because this game is just... It's so good to watch, this game, when it's moving. Like, I can't imagine what it would be like at 60, I really can't. Because 30 is perfectly acceptable in this game, because it's a 30 done right. And it does dip every so often, but for the most, it's such a high level of visual fidelity that you don't care. You know, you're too in it. And there's a sequence where you do a massive chase in Madagascar, which is one of the best chase sequences in Uncharted history. And I'm almost certain at that point that the frame rate's dipping pretty frequently in that sequence, but you just can't notice, because it's so beautiful and so stylized with effects. And that's how you do it, guys. You know, that's how you do 30 frames per second. You make it so that it's hard to see those fluctuations because it's still performing so well. And in a game like this, 60 frames would help, and that's why the multiplayer is 60, so that you can feel like the aiming and the shooting is better. But even as it stands, the aiming in the game is a measure of inaccurate, so when you shoot at a dude, you'll notice that the reticle will bloom a little bit, and inside of it, where your bullet lands is never the same spot twice. So there's always a measure of inaccuracy, even while being accurate, and I think that that's something that complements the frame rate. Because if it was, you know, super high, you would notice that the gunplay isn't as accurate as it could have been in a lot of ways. So I think it probably helps in a lot of ways. Then again, I've watched the multiplayer a decent amount, and it seems like the shooting in the multiplayer is better, way better than the campaign, because you've got that twice as long to do things, you know. Every single frame is refreshing correctly, and it enables you to be competitive, which is how it should be. And as much as I am a grumpy old man, and I'm the guy that's like, well, why the fuck did they reserve that for the multiplayer when no bastard's going to be playing it in a month? At the same time, at least the people who are competitive and who are wanting to get into it are going to have that experience. They're going to have it as it should be, because there's nothing worse than competing against humans and the frame rate in the toilet. It's really frustrating, so I'm willing to take a knee on that argument. Because when you're shooting against the computer, a lot of the times, if you're blaming the frame rate in this game, it's your fault, you know. Like, I can't think of a single moment where the frame rate has done something where I've been like, well, I would have survived if I could fucking see. But that's just not this game, you know. Dark Souls 3 happens all the time on Xbox One. Happens on PS4 as well, but on Xbox One there are just areas that are so wonderfully bad, they have to be seen to be believed. We're talking like 4 frames a second on Dancer in certain parts. Like 5 frames against Prince Lothric at certain phases and certain attacks because of all the particles. Don't even get me started on Pontiff Sylvain. Motherfucker just... like, it's so bad. And it's so stupid in a game like that, because that's a game you need it. You need that precision. And if you watch somebody play that game on PC at 60, the game looks beautiful. The game looks as it should run, but it does not run like that on the other systems. And I think in today's day and age, it's really sad that they're unable to optimize games in such a way to give us the experience we deserve. And it sounds entitled, and in a lot of ways it is, but you don't pay a small amount of money for these games anymore. You pay a lot of money, you know, unless you get them out of the bargain bin because you're a genius. But when you're paying that kind of money, you want it to work. You want the game to run at a certain measure of quality. And all these games that don't need to look at this game. This game is one of the best performing games I've ever seen. And it's dumbfounding that there can be excuses in today's day and age when Naughty Dog have just been like, fuck it, we'll make it work. We'll make conceits here and there. It's the same thing that Halo did with Halo 5 to a lesser extent, with the dynamic resolution to make sure that the performance was always there for the player. A lot of games have done this, and I think they did a really, really good job. Like, even Quantum Break. Quantum Break is a game that broke my heart. I still think it's a solid game, but there's so many issues with that game, it's kind of really sad. Because Remedy make a game every, 6 years. And you want to be able to play the game they make as much as you can to make up for the fact that you don't get one that often. And I'm probably never going to play Quantum Break again. And if I do, it'll be without using the time powers, which is the most interesting part of that game. Like pistol only, no time powers. This is an interesting fight though, this is another one of those moments where there's probably a path here to stealth it. Once again though, this is not the walkthrough to help you do that stuff. I like to kill stuff, even though the shooting in this game annoys me. This is a great fight though. I think Scotland has some of the best encounters in the entire game. Post those first 2. The first 2 I don't like. But this one, and pretty much everyone left in the rest of this level, is superbly designed. It's got a lot of fair cover, it's got a lot of cover that you can rely on, and it's just got an ensemble of enemies that isn't too long and is challenging enough to be fun. So I think they've got a really sweet balance in these firefights. But as always, you want to get into the habit of hitting everywhere you can post-fight, pick up some stuff, choose the weapons that you're comfortable with. I'm going to be going with the Bartok, and I'm going to be going with the AK. The Bartok is for emergencies where I need to get rid of somebody who's being annoying, like a grenade person or a heavy, even though it takes 3 bullets to break a heavy's armor, and then kill them, which is bullshit if you ask me. The fucking heavies suck dick. I just don't like them at all. 3 to 4 grenades just to kill heavies. It's so rough. It's beautifully rough. I wonder if this is masking loading in these moments. where they talk to each other and you do the whole bash triangle to move forward. Do you think it's doing a front-end load here? Loading the next zone? I think it is. It has to be. Because why would they constantly have you doing this? You know, it's like those weird doors in Gears and those weird doors in Army of Two, where it was just like, why are they doing this all the time? And why do we have to sit and watch it? Why does the developer think that this is in some way endearing? And the only thing I can think of is it's a clever way of hiding what's happening behind the scenes. But I'm not sure, you know. Because this game, look at it. Did you see a load bar? Did you see any of that? And you see load times on this fucking game because they give you that stupid percentage that never goes up. 99%. The other day, I was sat for 20 seconds looking at a load time that said 100%. How the fuck can it be 100% if it's still loading? Baffling. So weird. And it's funny though, because look at the game, guys. You know, look at this game. It is wonderful to look at. It's such a beautiful game. Even now, this is like an ugly area compared to some places, and it still looks bloody awesome. So the fact that they've been able to get the load times down as quick as they have when you compare it to something like Fallout 4, and you compare it to things like Dark Souls 3 and all these other fucking games that take an eternity to load. Look at Bloodborne. Bloodborne pre-patch was the worst loading screens ever. It was just completely worthless. I lost years of my life watching that shit. And Bloodborne ain't even that impressive a game. You know, it's a beautiful game, it's artistically very nice, but it ain't as impressive as this game, and it doesn't have the scope of this game. They've built fucking continents on this game, and you can see all of it, because it's really clever how they've done it. And then there's Bloodborne that's populated about 10 yards, and it still takes 20 minutes to let you get into the game. It's crazy. Which is why I personally think you can't be mad at any of the loading in this game, especially when you die. When you die, you are back in the game in about 5 seconds. It's a wonder, and it's the sign of truly great game design, because they understand that the player's probably going to die a lot, and the worst thing in the world is sitting and waiting to get back in the game. And Naughty Dog are just... they're so far ahead of everybody else, it's almost funny.